Coming up on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, we discuss the first round of the Dynasty Rookie Rankings. We talk about Jaxon Smith-Njigba. We talk a little bit about some other players that we currently have higher and lower on in our rankings. We have a special guest, a first-time guest on Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast to break down rankings debates. Friendly debates, of course, but we're going to talk about where we differ in our rankings. And then later this week, we'll be dropping that first edition on Razzball.com. So go check out the consensus Dynasty rookie rankings on our site. Before we do, make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com and check out all the great articles for baseball, hockey, basketball, and football. But today's show is the Dynasty rookie rankings starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. At this point, we're bringing in the Rook. Obviously, I'm super excited for one of our new writers, one of our new Dynasty guys. You can follow, his name is Colt Snooty. You can follow him at, Snody. Sorry, if Snody got there. Colt _Snody on Twitter. What's going on, Colt?
Hey, Bobby, thanks for having me, man. Friendly debates, of course.
Right, you know what I mean? I had to preface that. I didn't know. We just our first podcast together. Next thing you know, you might think it's a real debate. We get heated, and then we never do a show again.
I'm too laid back for that.
So, yeah, man. So today's show, we're going to be talking about the Dynasty rookie rankings, and myself, you, and Richard, a couple of guys from Razzball have basically put together a consensus Dynasty rookie rankings that will be on the site. But today we're going to talk about 5 players me and you differ on just a little bit. But before we get started, talk to us a little bit about, you did your first kind of run through of all these Dynasty rookies. What was kind of the first thing that popped in your mind? Any players you were higher on, lower on, any position you liked? Tell us a little bit about your first rankings.
A couple of them. The Jaxon Smith-Njigba being at 5 for you, 2 for me. I was also a bit different on, let's see, we had a little bit of a disparity on Chase Brown and Mingo. I was also, I think we were pretty in stride on a lot of these guys.
There was a lot of harmony between us, my friend. I liked it. It was good. It was good. Out of 50 players, there was very few me and you were different on. Did you find yourself leaning a little bit? I saw you were kind of bumping up some quarterbacks, like Bryce Young. You had a little bit higher than I've seen in the past. Is there a reason? Do you favor some quarterbacks, or do you just believe in these guys specifically?
I think these guys are all relatively safe. I mean, history tells us somebody's going to bust. I talked with a couple of friends of mine a couple of weeks ago on Rookie on the Rise with Britt Sanders and Eric Burkholder, and we were talking about, out of Bryce, Stroud, and Richardson, and we included Levis too, but specifically in the first round, we were talking about who's going to bust. And I was saying that I felt like, aside from the obvious fear of failure with Richardson, that Bryce could be that bust guy because of his size. I mean, he is quite an outlier with that size. I mean, his exceptions being the Drew Brees, Russell Wilson's, Kyler Murray's of the world. But I don't know. I do feel like this is a pretty good quarterback class. And Anthony Richardson is he stole the show at the combine, clearly. And just going to Indy with that offensive line, it's not as elite as it once was, but the system with Steichen, I mean, I'm pretty all in on Richardson.
I agree. I'm actually in on him too when it comes to redraft. If he earns the job week 1, mobile quarterbacks for fantasy football are just a cheat code, folks. So don't hesitate. Don't hesitate at Anthony Richardson. I think he's got enough weapons too to be a solid QB1 for fantasy if needed. All right, let's get into it. You know what? Let's get into these rankings debates today. We're going to talk a little bit about 5 players. Me and you are higher, a little bit different on when it comes to rankings. And I think we have to start at the top. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, he's the first guy. You have him at 2. You're like Bijan, and then you have him. Me, I got him at 5, still in my top 5. Yeah. But give me the reason why you have him as the second best player in rookie drafts right now.
I think it has so much to do with the Ohio State receiver pedigree. What we've seen coming out of Ohio State recently, just with Olave and Garrett Wilson last year. And I'm trying not to attribute that to recency bias alone. Now, we saw JSN barely play last year. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he didn't really need to play. to still be a first round wide receiver this year in the draft. I would have liked to have seen him play. It was pretty concerning. But he feels like one of the safest wide receivers. He feels like the next Keenan Allen, the next Amon-Ra St. Brown, that slot. His elite short area quickness, the way he excels in creating that quick separation, finding soft spots in the zone so naturally. And I was watching a breakdown of him not too long ago with Steve Smith, and he was breaking down just how cerebral he is as a route runner. Quarterback's best friend. He's like, that's a trust ball right there. The way that he broke 3 defenders in the zone, and he came back to bail his quarterback out so the ball wouldn't get picked. Like that, just that football IQ. I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba has a very safe, bright career ahead. And I think that longevity is going to, in Dynasty, is going to carry him beyond a Jahmyr Gibbs. So that's why I tend to lean receiver a little more than the running backs. I think that's kind of why I locked him in at 2.
Yep. So here's my thought process with him. He is going into an almost unprecedented situation when you have Tyler Lockett and DK
Right.
Metcalf. So I wanted to take a look at, so I just looked the last 10 years and I wanted to see, I was curious, like how many teams who had 2 players with 100 targets the year prior, who both ended up on the team the next season, then also had a first round pick drafted, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. It's like one of those weird situations. So I looked at this in my sample. I found 3 names that are going to be kind of obvious that make a lot of sense. Calvin Ridley, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase. Those are the 3 guys that popped up because Ridley, when he came in year 1, Sanu and Julio Jones just had 100 targets the year prior. You also have CeeDee Lamb with Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper, and Jamar Chase with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. So those guys are the 3 names that really popped out. For the most part, most of the guys you see, if you look at the number of targets, 248 targets last year is just well above even those 3 guys. So this is still way higher than we've seen in the past. The other aspect of this, too, there was a little bit of a slow burn. The first season, Calvin Ridley, his rookie year, was the wide receiver 27 in PPR points per game. In year 2, they traded Mohamed Sanu. Great. He finished as wide receiver 19. CeeDee Lamb, year 1, wide receiver 35 in PPR points per game. Year 2, Michael Gallup gets hurt halfway through the season. He takes off, finishes as the wide receiver 23. Next season, guess what? They trade Amari Cooper. So his path got cleared up pretty quickly.
Right.
Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase, okay? Wide receiver 6, wide receiver 3. Awesome. But the one thing I got to say about Jaxon Smith-Njigba is that he's going to need something like that to happen for him for the avenue to clear, because Lockett and Metcalf are both under contract for 3 seasons. And they do have outs in there, but they're not overpaying those guys. And I don't see them getting rid of Lockett and or DK. So my thought process here is that it might be a slow burn. He might not get the targets. Plus, you're talking Geno Smith. I like Geno. He was good last year. Yeah. Do we really think he's going to have 3 top 30 wide receivers in fantasy football? Probably not. Probably not. So I think there's just a little bit of hesitation for me to anoint him as the wide receiver 1 in this draft. So any final thoughts about the Jaxon Smith before we move on to the next player?
That's a great perspective. I really like the stats that you back that up with. I do think it's going to be a slow burn. I think it's going to be a quiet year 1. I could see him finishing like in the top 40, but maybe it might take another year or so for him to actually start to kind of ascend. So yeah, that was a great process.
All right, let's jump down to Jonathan Mingo. I have him high at 14. You have him at 19, 5 spots difference. This is actually the biggest gap we have in the top 2 rounds of our Dynasty rookie rankings. So talk to us why you might be a little bit lower on Jonathan Mingo heading into 2023.
I'm a little concerned about the college production's never been there. Now, his junior year, he broke his foot. Now, the 2 games before he broke his foot, he had 2 really big outings. So we could have been short-circuited a potential breakout junior year. Not totally sure. I mean, he's the size specimen guy that we don't have much of in this draft too. So I feel like there could be a little bit of an overreaction because we got a lot of small guys like your Mims, Josh Downs, all these guys, right? So I feel like, the voice of public opinion could be like, oh, Mingo, like he's AJ Brown coming out of Ole Miss, kind of. 6'2", 220, 4'4", 640. massive hands. I'm not. He wasn't an early declare, probably because he broke his foot his junior year, right? 40% of his 2022 stats came from 2 games against Vanderbilt and Central Arkansas, which he did have some beauties. That one-handed grab we all remember. I don't know. And he's got a lot of the traits. He checks some of the boxes for me, but he got the draft capital. He has the physical traits. His route running's a little limited. He landed on a team with a competent coaching staff in Frank Reich, and what we hope is going to be a great quarterback, still a rookie quarterback. And, there's some veteran receivers there. We got DJ Shark, we got Adam Thielen, we got Terrace Marshall on the proverbial cusp of a breakout eternally.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Oh, it's that time of year where everybody's looking good, baby. Everyone's gonna break out.
Best shape of his life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just at cost, I think I'm a little out. I did draft Mingo in a rookie draft a couple weeks ago. I did take him. I think at like the 2-4. I was okay with that. I've seen him go as early as like the 2-1. But just kind of at the cost, like the early second, I'm not really willing to take him there. But I don't know. I mean, he's speed and burst score 90th percentile, 96, 91st. So I mean.
Yep. All right. So first of all, Jamie's on the show again. Jamie's one of our greatest followers, and Colt Jamie, everyone meet. He's always out there.
What's up?
Big Razzball guy.
Great,
we appreciate him jumping on. Loves JSN talks. We got to shout out Jamie for jumping on once again, being a loyal follower. So here's my thought with Mingo. So first off, when you talk about, we just talked about Lockett and we talked about Metcalf. Well, ironically, the GM who is now the GM for the Panthers was there, who's in Seattle for 20 years, was the guy credited for basically pushing for DK Metcalf, ironically, an Ole Miss guy. So I like that kind of weird connection that he felt confident to stick his neck out for Mingo when he stuck his neck out for Metcalf, kind of coming from the same school. So I do like that. Frank Wright's another one. Frank Wright has success developing wide receivers. We saw it with Michael Pittman. His first year wasn't great, but by year 2, he's a top 30 receiver in PPR points per game. If you want to go back further, Keenan Allen was another one who hit the ground running, but he was a top 30 receiver by year 2. So I like the fact that the coach is willing to get this guy acclimated as soon as possible. So I do enjoy that from a dynasty perspective for him. The other little wrinkle to this too is the first round quarterback and the second round wide receiver. This kind of gives me a little bit of Kenny Pickett, George Pickens vibes, just a little bit in the sense of these guys are rookie camps. They're there together. They're like learning the offense together. They're getting in their foot in quicker. And when you look at the surrounding talent, the Panthers did a nice job adding startable NFL talent. And I'm not saying they're bad or good. I'm just saying they're serviceable players. But DJ Chark, 1-year deal. Adam Thielen has got 3 years on his deal, but he's 33 years old. And by the 3rd year, they can get out of his contract pretty quickly. And then Terrace Marshall, I don't know. What does Frank Wright think of Terrace Marshall? That's going to be a really good question to see in camps. Does Mingo pass him up right away, or does Marshall truly break out and hold him off for a year until Chark leaves? So there is some things we still have to see, but I do like the GM, coach, and also him being paired with another rookie for his long-term outlook. Any other thoughts about Mingo before we move on?
No, that's great. I didn't know that wrinkle.
There you go. All right. Chase Brown's the next one. And if anybody watches this show, they know that I'm a Chase Brown guy. I'm in. It's probably my irrational player I like from a rookie standpoint. But you have him all the way down to 29. I almost got triggered. I almost didn't have you on the show today. But I only have him at 20. I'm not too high on him, I guess. But we're 9 spots difference. It's pretty high. So talk to us why you might be a little bit lower than consensus on Chase Brown.
I was a little bit higher on him up until the last week or two, but it seems more clear to me that Mixon is going to be a Bengal this year. And there's been a lot of buzz about Travion Williams. Now, I think that they've had Travion Williams all this time and they barely used him. They've barely used Chris Evans. They seem to hate Chris Evans. They love P. Ryan. I feel like they just don't trust Mixon on 3rd down the way they trust P. Ryan, and now he's gone. So it does create an opportunity for Chase Brown to step in, and I think this is going to be his strength is on 3rd down. He's got good lateral agility in space. He's got good pass catching ability. My concern long-term is I think that Chase Brown could ascend to the number 2 role in the depth chart. and at least take some third down looks and, get a few carries between the 20s. But I don't think he's going to supplant Mixon off the field much. And I think Cincinnati may really address the position next year in a big way. So I don't know how in I am on Chase Brown as a long-term dynasty buy. I'm trying to kind of like parse how much I believe in the talent the opportunity cost right now isn't that high, but
right.
I mean, as a 1 year plug and play, he could do good things. I'm just not sure if I'm totally sold on the profile from like a long-term asset standpoint, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, 85th percentile or higher in 40-yard dash, speed score, burst score, bench press, college dominator.
Yeah.
So he's got some measurables to kind
That's
of
all
back
pretty
up
sexy.
that.
Yeah.
It is sexy. I'm getting a little hot. I'm getting some hot flashes over here right now. But I like what the OC already said. They already called this guy a pro. They're like, when I'm trying to, like right now, it's so early, but like Dynasty's starting to cook up a little bit. We have a little bit of OTA data, but OTAs really are informal. They're not doing a lot of padded stuff yet. So it's hard to really like understand. But like when the coaching staff is going out of the way to say this kid's already a pro. But the other thing is the Joe Mixon stuff. Like they were kind of wishy-washy on Mixon. I know Mixon. I'm all in, by the way. We just did a show last Saturday. I did a show 2 days ago talking about how Joe Mixon, I'm like 40 spots higher than ADP right now because I'm like, it makes no sense because the guy's going to be the number one running back.
He's going to be there. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. It doesn't make any sense. I think it'll correct over the next few weeks / months, but it's insane. He's going in like the 6th round. But anyway, this is not a Joe Mixon podcast. But with Chase Brown, like they're already trying to get him out the door. It sounds like there was not a lot of confidence about Joe Mixon coming back. And then he's only got a team option for next year. So like the team could be done with him. They're not going to pay him. No. So I just feel like, unfortunately, with the information we have today, Chase Brown could be walking into a starting job with Joe Burrow as his quarterback. You do not get a lot of opportunities to have, Joe Burrow is on a different level at quarterback. So when you could get tied to that player, you might as well take a 3rd round shot on a Chase Brown. There's a lot of 3rd rounders. I mean, for me, I'll take him in the 2nd, but that's why I'm excited about Chase Brown. I might have him a little bit higher. I might be drafting a lot of him because just give me that Joe Burrow tie and I'm in the go. Let's jump down to the next one. We're going to talk a little bit about Evan Hall. So Evan Hall, if people don't know, he's the running back for the Indianapolis Colts. Kind of a short, stocky guy at Northwestern, 5'10", 209. You have him about 15 spots higher than I do. I guess maybe it's because I thought I'm just more married to the idea JT will be there long term, but tell us why you think Evan Hall needs to be on people's fantasy radars in the 3rd round.
I just think he's a great receiving back too. I think he can see a lot of run in the passing game. Now, Richardson being the rushing quarterback that he is, that usually doesn't lend itself to a lot of checkdowns to running backs. However, I think Evan Hall is on a different level. He had the highest target share in the country last year. He was a Senior Bowl stud. His route diversity is 90th percentile, and that's not just stuff in the flat. So that versatility requires skill. He has a solid production profile. He had 55 receptions last year. I do believe that led the nation last year. I think that was even more catches than Gibbs and Bijan, guys like that. His contact balance and vision isn't great. His running style is kind of plodding. I think he is a nice compliment to Jonathan Taylor. I don't think Taylor's going anywhere anytime soon. I see more of like an upside swing in a guy like that. Now, to your point, I love the situation fit that you mentioned with Chase Brown. Like, give me a running back tied to Burrow. So I guess in the same vein, I'm kind of thinking, give me a running back that if JT misses some games with an ankle sprain, give me an Evan Hall and an Anthony Richardson offense with a decent line and pass catching chops.
Yeah, I think when I was doing this process, I'll admit I'll probably bump him up next time because you basically got me to look more into him, and I loved his profile, and I think So Shane Steichen, you got to remember Shane Steichen before his time with the Eagles. You got to think way back to the day he was a Chargers guy, and that's like Frank Wright, that's Ken Wisenhunt type guys. I think the biggest difference though is his time with the Chargers. Is he had a guy like Phillip Rivers, a statue, which, by the way, allowed a guy like Austin Eckler to emerge behind a Melvin Gordon as a solid 2B back or 1B back because the quarterback's willing to check down. There's so much history around mobile quarterbacks not throwing to their running backs enough. And I don't see a big time role being for a backup. Now, I can't be a hypocrite. JT is a free agent next year. So in theory, I can't make the argument for Chase Brown that Joe Mixon might be gone. In theory, JT could be gone next year. And that's what surprised me the most. I don't know why I thought JT was under contract, but he's not. So I was like, okay, so technically JT could be gone after this season, and Evan Hull could emerge as the guy. So I have to say that. But one thing I did like, Shane Steichen was on the coaching staff for the Chargers when they drafted Justin Jackson out of Northwestern. So Northwestern, same coaching staff. So there's a lot of there's more of a so he obviously liked what he got out of Justin Jackson as kind of a backup running back when it's time for the Chargers. So then they go out, they draft another kid out of Northwestern who has very good pass game chop. So I do like that little bit of a connection as well. But I do think I'm going to give him a slight bump based on our discussion today. Let's talk about the last guy. God, I hope I say his name right. Puka Nacua. Is that right? Nacua. Yeah. All right. Yeah. You have him at 37. I have him up on 25. So I'm higher than him. Can't say his name, but I know I have him high on him. So tell us a little bit about why you might be a little bit lower on him, maybe more as a 4th round dynasty pick than a 3rd round dynasty pick.
Yeah, I think this is just a little, it's not so much of an indictment on him. I mean, he's been a little riddled with injuries. That's part of it, but also it's just the offense too. It's how much longer is Stafford going to be there? And when are the Rams staring a full rebuild in the face? You know what I mean? It's just like question marks about the team. How much longer does McVay give it a go? I mean, I like Nacua's physicality. He plays the ball well. Natural instincts, comes from a football family. His athleticism isn't like top end in my opinion. I don't know. I think he's a pretty good player overall. Like I said, I think he's little bit of an injury history, and it's a little more of an indictment on the team moving forward as well. I mean, I don't mind him at where he's going as a later round target. I think I'd rather have some of the guys around him. I'd rather take the swing on your like a Cedric Tillman or someone like that, even though he's in a crowded room in Cleveland right now, or maybe even like the shot on Butte, who's somebody who a couple years ago was projected to be a round 1 wide receiver, but had a fall from grace. But we've seen a little more explosiveness from him, in my opinion.
Sean McVay is the oldest 37-year-old I've ever heard about in my life. They're like, oh, we don't know how old McVay might be done soon. He's tired. He's 37 years old. I mean, like Sean McVay, I know it's wild. I listen, McVay, you've done a lot. You're a whiz kid. I love you. You're literally 90% of the reason why I'm in on this, because my thought process is I need to justify when I'm taking 3rd round dart throws. I mean, really, to be honest with you, I would love to go back and see like 3rd round hit rates for rookie drafts, because I feel like they're got to be low. They got to be so low. 3rd, 4th round picks. But I want to like justify it with, okay, yes, I understand Stafford has had his bumps, but Stafford's not he's not 38, 39. We're seeing these quarterbacks play for a long time now. And I just think to myself, who does he have to compete with right now? Okay, so you have Ben Skoranek, former 7th round pick, and you have Van Jefferson, who's been disappointing up to this point behind Cooper Kupp. That's the competition. Tutu Atwell, former 2nd round pick, very undersized speed receiver. But there's things that I like about him, because they already compared him to a former player who succeeded on this coaching staff, Robert Woods. They said they like the way they could use him in the running game, and they have a role for them in his mind. No one else is going to fulfill that no one has fulfilled that Robert Woods role since he's left, how they can use him on end arounds, use him in red zone for carries. And I think if that's something they actually envision for him, that's going to get him on the field. The other aspect I like too is that LaFleur, their OC, basically said he doesn't play like a rookie. They said already in OTAs, he knows the playbook. He's doing a very good job. I know that could be coach speak, but I like the fact that they're talking about his demeanor and how he knows the plays already, and he's getting reps with Stafford because of it. But let's talk about the talent. So Jeremy at Popes FFH on Twitter, shout out to you. I don't know you, but you did this stat. Hopefully you're right, because if you're not, it's on our show. So he said within the last 4 draft classes, 11 of 123 players had a yards per route run in college of 3 yards or more. Okay. Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, CeeDee Lamb, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and guess who? Puka Nacua. That's insane. Like, that's the
great
players.
company.
That's great company. Now, there was other guys I didn't say, like D. Eskridge and Tyler Johnson are also on that list, but there's a lot of big-time names. So I do think there is some talent, but I like the fact that they already have a role for him as well. All right, let's discuss it. That's it. That's the 5 players we have our rankings dispute about so far on today's show. Colt, before we go, man, any final thoughts about the rookie dynasty rankings before we close out the show?
Yeah, I think you've stated a really good case on a couple of these guys. I'm gonna have to kind of reassess some of my thought process and where I have some of these guys, especially Chase Brown and Puka Nacua.
Nice, I like that, and you got me on
yeah.
Hall, so we're in. I think this is the problem now.
Okay.
We when you're around your team and they start giving you, you're like, oh crap, I am low on that guy. It happens almost every time, so I'm glad we have
Right.
that impact on each other.
But I think this is a good process too. We can kind of all compare and contrast, and because you pointed out things that I didn't think about or know, or
Same, man. Honestly, I love it.
all
Anyway,
relative.
so before we close, 100%. And that's kind of the point of these shows. It's really for us. I know the viewers come on here and watch, but it's really for us too, to like learn a little extra and get extra insights from other people. So it's really just a selfish podcast, folks. All right, before we close out the show, Colt, tell the people what you got upcoming on Razzball, wherever they can find your content. Tell them where they can follow you, etc. Before we close out.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Colt_Snody. That's SNODY. You can also follow what we're doing on Twitter at SWF_podcast. Me and 2 of my really close friends out here in North Carolina, we've been doing a football podcast for a couple years. Got a couple of upcoming articles coming out on Razzball too, some rookie profiles and some draft process stuff coming up, rankings. Definitely be sure to check out some of the new work coming up by Nate Polvote, good friend of mine, and Richard Sickles on Razzball as well. Some great articles those guys are putting out. And check out some of my friends in Charleston, South Carolina, the FF Dynasty. Those guys just put up a really, really comprehensive rookie mock draft with some really awesome guys in the industry. They sourced out all 12 draft spots. They did a lot to make it happen, and they just posted round 2 today. It was a great watch, a lot of really good content. So give those guys a listen too. Thanks for having me, Bobby.
No, of course, man. Honestly, before we go, Jamie's got a hot take. I want to get your thoughts on this, Colt, before we go. All right. He's got Rashawn Johnson. I'm assuming the Bears running back. I think it's the only guy that I could think of at number 4 in his rookie rankings, but I'm looking to move him ahead of Miller. So RB4, is that too aggressive? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think so. I have him as I have him 1 spot behind Kendre Miller. So that would put him as my RB5, I believe. And
there you go.
Spoiler alert, my article coming out on Friday is on Rashawn Johnson. So
there you go.
That might be able to speak more to my case too than I could let on in audio right now.
So go check it out, Jamie. Go check out the article that Colt's going to be dropping tomorrow. Thank you for joining once again. This is the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. Make sure you go follow us across the board on TikTok and IG. And make sure, of course, you jump over to razzball.com to check out all the great articles from Colt, by the way. And make sure you follow me at Bobby Lamarco on Twitter. Thank you for joining once again. We are out of here, folks. Razzball.